220-0659. So again, the text number is 306-220-0659. So he's going to do his presentation first, but then I'll be making a note of all the questions. You can text the questions anytime you want, and I'll be writing them down on a board for him, and then he'll deal with them after his presentation. Okay? So here's Tony.
Thanks, Rita. As Rita said, I'm Tony Murphy. My official sort of title is that I'm the liaison librarian for the English department. What that really just means is that anything the English department needs me to do as far as the library is concerned, I get it done. That includes working on the reference desk. For anybody who actually makes it into the U of S physical location, come to the reference desk if you need help. That's what we're there for. There are people working there that are maybe even more helpful than me, though I'm pretty helpful. The other thing, too, is that I take care of the collection of materials for the library, too, for English. So the books that go into the collection, journal articles, the serials and journals that we buy for the collection, as well as electronic resources. So the databases, electronic journals, e-books, which are starting to become more and more common in our catalog. I take care of most of that as well. And I also teach library instruction classes like this kind of session to make sure that people are getting a handle on library skills and research skills. So we'll start, and I'm just going to click over here. And just pop into my PowerPoint first. Just a quick look at a bit of an agenda for today, some learning goals. I'm hoping that we'll develop some search strategies, think about essay topics, how we can make those work for our research, starting the research process with the actual essay topic. Also, how to find books, how to get to the appropriate English literature databases for journal articles, as well as figuring out what each database includes, understanding search functions and functionality, how to make those search functions work to your advantage. Advanced search techniques, we obviously don't have time to go through them all, but we will show you some of the basic ones that you'll use most commonly, and we'll show you where to find others as your skills increase and you start wanting to learn a few more tricks of the trade to get into the databases further. And then we'll see what happens, see if we can connect two assignments a little bit if we get a chance to do that near the end. So first, developing a search strategy. My recommendation is start with your topic. Your professor gives you a set of essay topics. Some people will just take the first one and do that. But I think it's probably a smarter idea to go through them all. What I always did was sat down with a highlighter and zeroed in on the key phrases, key concepts, and kind of the nuggets of information that could be pulled out of an essay topic, the things that start leading you towards a thesis, the things that also start leading you towards your research on that essay. So break it down. However, I used to use margin notes on my essay topic sheet, things like that. Writing down in the next line down synonyms, related terms. Maybe there's a word you're not quite sure about in the essay topic, so you get a dictionary definition, quickly jot that down to make sure you're understanding that term. But brainstorming for synonyms and related terms, again, to help you with your research, because once you hit the library catalog, maybe the term that's in your topic isn't perfect, and you feel like only one or two items are coming up, finding synonyms and related terms can help you to expand beyond that. Before we get to the library catalog and the databases, just a few big picture ideas to help you get research started. First and foremost, the difference between primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. You may have dealt with this a bit in class. If so, it never hurts to reconnect a bit. Primary sources, basically original materials that often convey new ideas, discoveries, or information. So in the scientific world, primary sources would be experiments, new methodologies, articles and research studies that cover these new methods, things like that. New discoveries, fresh information about a particular topic. Think in terms of primary material originating from the time period under study, and that means historically primary materials are biographical, they could be diaries, travel logs, right? Travel writing's hugely popular these days in the bookstores. Travel writing is a good example of what's usually primary information, because it's usually first-hand accounts of somebody's actual travel. Some examples, I've said a few already, but original research studies. So if you've developed new research in the sciences, or even in an English class, if you're the first one to say something absolutely new about a particular novel that you're studying, it's not primary research in the sense that you've created a literary work, but you've created an original research study based on that topic. Autobiographies, manuscripts, diaries, letters. Just remember that a biography is secondary and an autobiography is primary. So as soon as you throw the auto in there, then it becomes primary. So if you write a biography and I'm utterly fascinated by your life story, that's a primary document that I may then take and use as part of a larger biography that I'm writing about you if I find you that fascinating. In which case, then my biography becomes secondary and will probably use your primary autobiography as material for it. But also think about newspaper articles as well. There may be opportunities to use that in your classes as a source of research. Newspaper articles are primary research from a particular time period. News reports, things like that. Sort of an in-the-moment accounting of what's happening in that period of time. We tend to think more about textual materials, but what about artifacts, archival materials? Canadian history is filled, the study of Canadian history is filled with, physical artifacts, things made of something other than paper with text on them. And we study those in ways that are actually pretty similar to the way we look at literature. So looking at those as primary material can sometimes be the case. Certainly works of art as a primary source. Literature, music, painting. Literature is obvious. That's what we're dealing with in the class you're in. But in some of your other classes, music, painting, in history, some of these other different kinds of works of art can come into play. And those are all primary materials as well. Secondary sources, think in terms quite simply of them being based on primary sources largely. Again, if you write an autobiography and I use it as partial material for a larger biography, that I'm also using other people's words about you, other sources about you to write, then your primary source is helping me to write my secondary biography about you. Generally written at a later date, discussion, analysis, or interpretation of the original primary source. In a literature class, as I was getting at before, you may have a novel that's a primary source or a poem that you're studying. The work you do, if you're interpreting that literary work, then you're creating secondary criticism. That's literary criticism, and it's secondary material based on that primary work. Examples, review articles, analyses of research studies. Review articles, look at them in a different light. Reviews can be a paragraph long, they can be a quarter of a page, or a lengthy review article in the New York Times or something like that could end up being, 10, 20 pages long. So reviews are secondary sources, but they may have an impact on the kind of work you do, whether in a literature class, a history class, or something like that. But they take very different forms, so don't shy away from a review article just because it's 20 pages long. It may be looking at the literary text you want to look at, but it might be comparing it to others. It might be comparing it to other works by the same author, maybe similar works by, similar authors, looking at Mark Twain, for instance, within American Lit as a whole, might be one way to think about that. Secondary sources, in the case of academic research, are often found in peer-reviewed publications, and I'll explain that in just a minute, but let's introduce that phrase now. The idea of something being peer-reviewed before it's published. But again, biographies, are secondary, reviews, critiques of an author, that's secondary as well, and analyses of original documents or archival materials. So whether you're writing about music, art, literature, your critical analysis is a secondary work. Tertiary we don't talk about as much because it's something of a given, I think, in the way we think about these materials. But any source that is a collection of primary and secondary sources, and literally collecting them together in a larger source, that's tertiary. Examples, pretty simple, dictionaries and encyclopedias. Now, if you go to the reference collection in our library here at the U of S, we have a collection of dictionaries and encyclopedias behind our reference desk. They're a combination of primary and secondary documents, and all encyclopedias are, that deal with a particular topic that you're looking at. Indexes and bibliographies are secondary, and we'll be looking at the databases we'll look at in a few minutes. Those databases are basically indexes, and they're in a certain sense an electronic bibliography as well, though a very complicated one. But those indexes and bibliographies collect the source of that secondary material and give you access to it. Directories and almanacs, pretty simply, every time you use a phone book, you're using a directory. And every time you wonder what the rest of this winter is going to be like, and you go to the Farmer's Almanac, you're looking at a collection of materials that are brought together to give us a sense of historically what the weather might have been, what the climate might be, what it is now, and what we might have in the future. So you're using these materials, I would say, if not on a daily basis, on a pretty regular basis in your life. So it's not, tertiary sources are pretty straightforward, I think. The other thing, other than primary, secondary, and tertiary for the kind of sources you need, and certainly in history, I would say that one of the biggest questions we get at the reference desk is, I need a primary source for my library assignment. What is that? And so we tend to emphasize that a little bit more. The other thing we emphasize is the difference between scholarly and popular sources as well. So whether it's journal articles or books, scholarly versus popular is important because in some cases your professor may say, I only want scholarly work in that bibliography for that assignment, or in your works cited for the essay or reference page or whichever style you're working in. So what is scholarly? Well, there's a few aliases: academic, refereed, peer-reviewed, which we introduced a couple of pages ago. But basically, scholarly work, you want to, when you're doing your research, it's about assessing authority and assessing quality, if you will, but certainly seeing if there's some authority attached to that scholarly work before you use it and represent it in your essay. Refereed, an interesting word for it because quite literally there's a referee between you as an author, if you're submitting a journal for publication, or an article I should say. There's a referee between you and the publisher. And the way it works, I'll keep it pretty simple, but if I submit an article for publication, the journal is going to take my name off that article and send it out anonymous to 2 or 3 readers who are going to assess the quality of it, and they're going to send a report back to that publisher saying, yes, Tony can write, yes, his argument is brilliant, or his argument is terrible, his logic is weak, his writing is horrible. You never know, the report may be negative or positive, but what happens is the publisher of the journal then says, okay, look, this is a quality article, my readers have all said that the argument is good, the writing is great, it's a new idea perhaps, some fresh thinking on a topic, let's get this thing published. And what that means is that if you're looking at database articles and you see that they're peer-reviewed, somebody's done that homework for you. They've established that quality and that authority for you. It's not a perfect system, and yes, junk does get through periodically, but we're all critical thinkers, and usually we can assess that for ourselves too. But for the most part, the system works, and the peer review process establishes some quality and some authority for us as users of these materials. Okay, scholarly journals written by academics. Usually, almost exclusively. They're not always peer-reviewed, but most often are, because that process is built into the academic system now. The author's credentials, this is worth remembering that, if you've got an article, you're almost bound to see, usually the title is there, the name of the journal, and right after that there's going to be the author's name and usually a quick breakdown of their credentials. Often where they work, so it may say, Tony Murphy, Harvard University, something like that. And the credentials will usually be relevant to the topic being covered in the article. So for me, I'm a librarian and I also have multiple degrees in English. If I start publishing on nuclear physics, I would hope that the publishing industry would question my credentials to write on nuclear physics, and maybe they would prefer an actual physicist to do it. But usually what you're going to find is that the nuclear physicists are writing on nuclear physics, and people like me stick to English and librarianship and the things that we know best. The other thing with scholarly articles, you're going to get bibliographies and citations at the end. Basically what this allows you to do, its primary purpose, is to let a reader trace the author's sources and again establish some authority. What did they use for their own research? What sources did they use to bolster the argument they're making? In the same way that your professor, if you're doing a research essay, they're going to be looking at your work cited and saying, gee, what sources did they use? Is it all websites, or is there actually some scholarly sources? Is there something other than Wikipedia here? Is there some journal articles? Maybe something, reference to a book or two? Something like that. So it's a way to trace the work of the author to see what they've put into the research effort. But it also serves another purpose, and this is sort of tips and tricks time, if you will. What it allows you to do is, say you're having a bit of a rough time with your research, you're not coming up with a whole lot, and let's say worst case scenario, you've found one journal article or one book on your topic and you're starting to tear your hair out. The nice thing about a bibliography at the back is that you can go in and have a look and see what other sources there are that maybe are coming up in different ways in the catalog. It gives you a chance to use somebody else's legwork in a fair way and see what other research there is out there. If the one book you found has a bibliography filled with 50-year-old critical sources and research sources, then you get a sense right away that it's probably not all that much use to you, depending on what kind of work you're doing. But on the other hand, if it gives you, again, the synonyms that we talked about at the beginning of the session, and maybe gives you some related terms that you can then bring into your research, it may help you to get past a bit of a logjam and start finding some other articles, because let's face it, there's always going to be terminology that we don't click on. And it's always nice when you find another word for what you're trying to get across, what you're trying to look for, another term for it that maybe just was escaping you for a bit there. And using somebody else's bibliography, as well as tables of contents and things like that, can help you out a lot. Scholarly journals look for their publishing by university presses. So if you've got a journal that's published by, let's say Duke University or Harvard or the U of Toronto, one of those institutions, well, there's a pretty good chance that some authority has been attached to that they've gone through a bit of a critical process before publishing that journal article. This isn't some back alley publishing house. This is a legitimate Canadian or American university publisher, and they have a lot at stake. And they need to be able to stand by the quality and authority of the work they publish. And also think in terms of not just university presses, but academic associations. We'll be looking at the Modern Language Association, or MLA, International Bibliography. It's one of the databases we'll look at. But they do a lot of publishing. They're the biggest language and literature association, on the planet, basically, and they do a fair bit of publishing, and the work that they do, again, is It's peer-reviewed, it's assessed for quality and authority, and other academic associations, depending on, it's easy to check up on them, and you can usually establish the authority of that association and how much credibility they have before you hit their books or articles. But an academic association like a university press has a lot at stake in what they put out into the world as far as publishing, so they work very hard to establish the credibility of what they're doing. The intended audience for scholarly work, usually the academic discipline that the article deals with, or the book. We'll talk about books more in a minute. Not necessarily though, but usually English research is intended for an English literature audience most times. That doesn't mean that people from other disciplines don't use interdisciplinary work. I read a lot of history for the work I do. Historians read a lot of literature. The only thing is that you have to be wary that some of the language can be technical. It can be downright jargonistic. So you can get some highly technical jargon going there. That doesn't mean it needs to be daunting. It means you just need to have a good dictionary with you when you read some of this stuff. So the language can be a bit technical, but it doesn't need to stop you. I still have two things beside my computers in my office and at home all the time, and that is a decent dictionary and a good style guide. So some of these things never change, and that way language doesn't stop you in your tracks. You just look it up, and there maybe the odd margin note with a definition can help you as well. Some prior knowledge might be expected, but again, it doesn't stop you from reading across other disciplines if you find something that's going to help you with a research paper. On the popular side, as you can see, I've put popular magazine articles. I throw magazine in there because that's a good way to start thinking about the difference. Journals are journals, and they tend to be academic. So an academic publication is usually a journal. Magazines tend to be popular. And this is kind of overly simplistic perhaps, but think about newsstands. If you find it on your newsstand, it tends to be popular. If you find it in an academic library, then and it's attached again to a university press or an academic association, then you've got a scholarly journal. Popular articles, think in terms of a general audience more than specialists in an academic field. One example that I always throw around is my dear old mother, who always had an interest in psychology but didn't have a psych degree. She didn't have a formal university level education in psychology, but I remember growing up that we always had Psychology Today floating around the house. She subscribed to it. So she didn't want to, wade into an academic journal on psychology. She just wanted to be kept abreast of developments in the field. So she subscribed to Psychology Today, which is a popular magazine based on psychology, and that gave her the information she needed just to keep her current and to keep her interest going in psychology. The authors on the popular side could be a staff writer or journalist. They may not have the academic background in the subject matter that most scholarly publishing will have. That's not to say that journalists don't have academic qualifications. Some of them have a great deal of academic qualification that they bring to their work, but it's not always a necessity on the popular magazine side for the kind of writing that goes on there. Bibliographies and works cited are going to be more of a rarity on the popular side. You may find them, but chances are they're not going to be as in-depth or provide the kind of coverage, and they're not going to take the research to the level that the academic scholarly side would. Scholarly books, same sort of thing that we talked about with the articles, the journal articles, usually published by a university press, by a scholarly association or society, but also think in terms of books in an academic series. If you see a book that's number 15 in a particular series, especially in a university library, chances are it's a project that a publisher has invested a fair bit of time, money, and a few other things into. And again, these kinds of books are vetted or assessed for quality and authority at a very high level. Usually a series is about a broad topic, and each book is a more focused, narrowly focused look at an aspect of that topic. But series can run, 10, 15, 40, 50 books. But again, the kind of credibility that's attached to those is pretty substantial. So usually if you see something in an academic series, if you're researching and you've got books that are, part of a series like that, then you've got some built-in credibility there. So something to keep an eye out for in your research. Authors of scholarly books usually have that academic affiliation, even more so than on the journal article side. And I'll say they're established authorities on the subject, more often than not, certainly most of the time. And what that basically means is that in academia, the book is still pretty much king. And if you're publishing books, by the time you've got 2 or 3 books out, assuming you're writing on, the same subject matter, say you have 2 or 3 books on Shakespeare, 2 or 3 books on Mark Twain, and maybe even, heaven forbid, 2 or 3 specifically on a novel like Huckleberry Finn or something, you're pretty much an established authority on that subject. So if you've got somebody writing books on a particular subject and you find that academic affiliation, and you follow it up by having a quick look to see if there's a university press or something similar, you've got a fairly high quality academic work usually. So these are just the things you do, and it doesn't take long, a matter of seconds. In our library catalog, you open up a record, have a quick look at the book that's represented in the catalog, and you can learn a lot just from looking at that. Academic books, scholarly books, they tend to have very extensive bibliographies and indexes, and again, yes, they establish authority, like I said, with the journal articles, but it's a good way to help your research along. If you're finding that your search terms aren't working, maybe they're not producing much, rather than scrapping that topic altogether in frustration, if you find a couple of books, maybe have a look, at their table of contents, as I said before, but look at their bibliographies, look at their indexes, see if there's some related terms or synonyms that will help you with your research. Popular books, one way to note the difference is you're usually going to have a more general trade publisher. Think in terms of a publisher like Random House, maybe Simon & Schuster. They do a lot more general popular publishing than scholarly. Those popular books tend to be, they're aimed at a broader audience, not necessarily specialized. You're going to find less of this sort of material in an academic library. The author may not be the credentialed academic from the scholarly side, might be, but doesn't necessarily have to be. They could be from a business or a corporate side, and journalists, people like that. So it's a little bit different, but there are ways to kind of gauge whether or not you're heading towards the popular side or the scholarly side before your professor points it out to you, perhaps in an essay comment. The bibliographies and indexes might be there. It's not written in stone as it would be in the academic side, but they're usually less extensive. The indexing may go at a far shallower level into the book than on the scholarly side. The bibliographies, the research that went into it may not be as in-depth either. So some differences there to think about. Let's go now to the catalog, and I'm going to shift our focus from these PowerPoint slides over to the library's website. So basically, if you remember this URL, and if you look up top, library.usask.ca, you can get to the library catalog through PAWS. You can get to it through the university website, just usask.ca. But if you just remember to throw library in front of it, library.usask.ca, you'll hit our homepage. And frankly, this is your ticket to academic success. I say with a smile, but pretty seriously as well. Let's have a quick look at this homepage and kind of orient ourselves a bit. I want to show you over here on the right-hand side, and I'll just move my cursor around a bit since I'm not live with a pointer or anything. You've got quick links on the right-hand side. And if you use the drop-down menu, you've got options. So let's go right down to off-campus students. And what that does is it breaks down for you a lot of the services that are available to you as off-campus students. And I'm just going to go to my own library, which is the main library, the Murray Library. That's why it says Off-Campus Library Services Murray. That's not me, that's my library. And you can see here that it takes you to an off-campus library services page. You've got services for you as students, for instructors, resources that are available, contact information, research and writing help, and there's some frequently asked questions, who is eligible, who gets to use our off-campus services. Chances are, if you're listening to me right now, you're in, you get to use it. And there's a connection here to the university bookstore as well if you need to buy texts or anything for your classes. Request materials is probably one of the more busy buttons here. I'll just quickly click that. It takes you to a form that you can use, and it's kind of like interlibrary loans if you've ever interlibrary loaned something through your public library maybe or through another campus library. What we do is you put in a request, we find the material, and we ship it out to you. So you've got access to the forms there, as well as some information on if you happen to be in the library at the U of S, you can certainly come in, grab what you need, and sign it out that way too. Let's pop back to the home page here. On the left, under University Library, one of the things, if you write nothing else down or imprint nothing else on your memory from this session, remember this How Do I page. Even if you write down How Do I and then wonder why you wrote it down later, go to the website, you'll find it here, and I'll go in. Because what this does is it basically just reaffirms a lot of what I'm covering today. So I pack a lot of information into these sessions, and I have a relatively short amount of time to do it in. What's nice is that you can refresh by popping over here to this How Do I page. And not just for things that I talk about, there's also citation help here. So all your style guides, there's online versions if you need them for MLA, for APA, Chicago style, depending on what class you're in or what discipline you're in. But also finding books, finding book reviews here, finding journal articles. There's lots of good help here, and it reaffirms what I'm talking about. And that way too, if you go here, I'll show you my contact information in a couple of minutes, but you can ask me questions as well, and if some of this isn't making sense, you can certainly get a hold of me and I can clarify something that's in the How Do I pages and also what we've talked about today. So that's important there, and first things first, we'll head right into the middle. And what we've got is a series of tabs. They're front and center. Pretty much the first thing your eyes are going to focus in on. And you've got USearch, which I'm not going to talk about much today. It's a new tool that we have in the library. And USearch is a topic for another day as a search vehicle. We'll start with the catalog, though, so I'm going to click on that tab. And the catalog is our electronic online catalog. It used to be a card catalog, what are the odds? But if anyone remembers that, the antique card catalog, they still have one in Murray Library, so you can come and, pay your respects at some point if you're ever on campus. But we've moved everything from cards to the electronic realm, and now you can search everything online, and I'm going to show you just a few of the benefits of using this. So, drop-down menu here. Word searching, that's keyword searching. It's a great place to start. I would say it's probably not the best place to end your research process in the catalog, but it's a great place to start. You can also search by title, author, subject. I won't worry about ISBN, but the LC call number is great if, say, a friend of yours says, "Oh, I saw the perfect book. Here's the call number for it. That's what you need for your research." You can just kick the call number in, search by LC number here. And LC is Library of Congress. That's whose system we use. That's whose cataloging system we use, and that's the kind of call numbers you're going to see on the books too. They're going to be different from maybe the Dewey Decimal call numbers that you might remember from the public library world or school libraries. But we use the Library of Congress system, and I'll explain how we use it in the catalog as well. Let's start though with just some word searching. Like I say, it's a great place to start because if you've done, you've broken down your essay topic, you've got some keywords, some key concepts, maybe some phrases, you figured out some synonyms, some related terms, you can just kick in a word search. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with one of my favorite authors. I might use yours, but you're not here and I am, so we'll use mine. One of my faves, a guy named Ralph Ellison, African-American novelist. Just for cocktail party conversation, you can tell people that he won the National Book Award in 1952. That's pretty exciting. Anyway, let's do a quick word search for Ralph Ellison and just see what we get. So I've put in no tricks, nothing fancy, just Ralph and Ellison, and I get 72 items. Now 72 isn't bad. You can do a word search and get thousands of items, and then you're thinking, how do I wade through all of this to find the nuggets of pure gold that I need for my research? Well, in this case, it's only 72, which isn't too bad, but if you're as lazy as I am, you might think to yourself, well, how can I get that down a little bit? And if you use quotation marks, put quotation marks around Ralph Ellison there, or any phrase that you want searched as an exact phrase. The quotation marks turn that into an exact phrase, and the online catalog will then only look for Ralph Ellison together as a phrase. Let's just search that and see if it makes a bit of a difference. Well, it hammers it down from 72 to 50. All right, it's not a big jump, but it's a substantial jump for sure. And what it did was it got rid of all the, let's say, Ralph Goodales, or I don't know any Ellison, so let's just say Johnny Ellison or something like that. So it gets rid of all of the names that might have Ralph or Ellison, but not necessarily the two together, and it narrows the focus down to just my old buddy Ralph Ellison here. And out of the 50 items, we see Ralph Ellison in some of the titles, like number 4 here that I'm highlighting. But some of them you're not going to see his name in the title, which means you've got to maybe go into the record a bit. Let's do that quickly. Let's just see. This is a good example. What the online catalog does for us now, which the old card catalog couldn't do, certainly not as quickly or efficiently or with the kind of volume of information that we have now. Look at the record here. Fine, you've got the author of the book, you've got a title, but you also have under subject here, if you scroll down a little bit under details, what it is these are Library of Congress subject headings, and what they are is the preferred phrasing for how the Library of Congress subject headings want you to search for this. So the catalog uses these subject phrases as their preferred search terms. So place, philosophy in literature, for example. How many of us are going to write it out that way if we're thinking off the top of our heads? Probably not very many. So what this lets you do, though, is you can click on these. Now, interestingly, we don't really see Ralph Ellison in the subjects, and we don't see him in the title. I'll show you the subjects in a minute, but let's go down a little bit further. What we have now in our electronic catalog, and it's not comprehensive. Some older materials aren't going to have tables of contents, but you've got a table of contents here. So again, if you're looking for synonyms, related terms, your research isn't going anywhere, but you found this one book, you can go and look at the table of contents, see that there is an article or a chapter that involves Ralph Ellison here. His name is highlighted in red, because the system does that for us. It says, hey, look, I found your search term, and I've highlighted it for you so you can see where it is on this page. But you can have a quick look now, instead of having to, well, for distance education students, it's even harder, but even for somebody like me, I would have had to, trot upstairs in the library, find the book on the shelf, open it up, get a paper cut, look at the table of contents, and assess the book to see if it was going to be helpful to my research. A lot of it now, if you've got this kind of information in the catalog, you can do that without leaving your chair, which is, not a bad thing. So it gives you a lot more access to information than ever before. And sometimes there's summaries as well, not only table of contents, but a quick sort of abstract style summary. And an abstract is basically just a short blurb that tries to cover what the book is about in a paragraph or so. It's kind of like, if you've ever done any business writing, it's like an executive summary of the book, but even shorter. So a lot of information available to you now right in the catalog that will save you a lot of time and energy. And if you're not getting it so far, you can tell I'm all about saving time and energy and making this process as efficient and helpful as possible. Because a library shouldn't be a place where you tear your hair out. It should be a place where you go and quickly and efficiently get your research done. It doesn't need to be an endless hassle. And there's a lot built into it now that takes a lot of the hassle away. Now, including what I was talking about before, the idea that with these subject headings here, you can click on them. And I'm going to just go to the biggest one here. American Literature, 20th Century History and Criticism. Well, yes, you can say that Ralph Ellison, because he was an African-American writer, he is an American literature writer, he lived and worked in the 20th century, and there's going to be history and criticism written about him. Unfortunately, here you've got, I'll just highlight it here, 584 items under that subject heading. So this one isn't going to be the most helpful to you if you're doing research on Ralph Ellison. Let's go to one there was one down here. Ralph Ellison in Progress. Let's click on that. Now he's in the title, so he's even more of a focus in this book than the last one we looked at. There's a summary here that breaks down what this book is about. So that's helpful as well. It looks like it includes a review from Book Jacket, which is a book review magazine. But look at these subjects here. Ralph Ellison Technique. Ralph Ellison, Ellison Ralph, and I'll explain that in a minute. You've got Technique, Manuscripts. Invisible Man is that award-winning novel I was talking about. Invisible Man, this is going to be, I'll click on it. This is going to be critical works that deal specifically with that novel, and there's 9 of them. So, this is great. If you were studying Invisible Man and had to write a research essay on it, boom, you've got 9 items right there that deal specifically with that book. You've just saved yourself a lot of time. Okay, so let's back up for a sec. We did a word search. We narrowed it to an exact phrase, Ralph Ellison. Now, if I was going to do an author search, the thing to remember, and the public library still does this, but in our Google age, we've maybe forgotten sometimes that, we can't just bang in Ralph Ellison in any old fashion and get hits like we do on Google. And frankly, not always very good hits on Google either. What the library catalog wants you to still do is search surname first. Okay? So Ellison Ralph, if you're doing an author search, so you can see here that I've taken that drop-down menu, flipped it over to author, reversed it so that it's Ellison Ralph, and I'm looking in the entire collection. And you can narrow things down if you just wanted journals instead of books, e-resources, electronic resources. There are options there once your searching gets a little more complex and in-depth. Let's search Ralph Ellison as an author. 16 items come up. The first item is an e-book. Let's have a very quick look at that. Now, if you see this big red E, you've got an electronic source there. You're not going to have to ask for it to be sent to you. You have access right here in the catalog, and I'll very quickly show you that. Click on the online version. It takes you to the database that has this work in it. And if you click on the title, let me get that cursor out of the way. Ralph Waldo Ellison, there we go, died in 1994, just for your own trivia. And The Crisis of Optimism, and it takes you to, looks like an interview with Ralph Ellison here that he's been called the author of. So here's an interview with Ralph Ellison. Let's roll back out of that and move along. Just a quick look there at an ebook. Remember that it'll, instead of a call number to find it on the shelf, it just says the online version and lets you click your way to it. Otherwise, I mean, you've got his collected essays, you've got probably an introduction or some criticism that he contributed to a book about Dostoevsky. So this isn't one of Ralph Ellison's novels, this is Dostoevsky's, and he's obviously contributed something to it, so he's listed as an author. There's Invisible Man, his most famous novel. He's contributed something to a collection here called the Jazz Cadence of American Culture. So everything you see here is going to have something. This one's kind of weird. What's Normal? Narratives of Mental and Emotional Disorders. I'm not sure what it's got to do with Ralph Ellison, but let's have a very quick peek here. I don't see a reference to Ralph Ellison until I get in there. It's not highlighted for us, but there is one of his short stories. So, as weird as that title might look, and you might think, wow, that doesn't look like anything to do with an African-American novelist, they've decided to include one of his short stories here. So, leave no stone unturned. Have a quick look and see if, even the strangest sounding title may have something in it that would be helpful. Okay, so that's an author search there. Subject searching is similar, surname first, and we're just working with one author for now. Other subjects could be, World War I, the Communist Party, maybe, something to do with blues and jazz if we're thinking about Ralph Ellison. But let's search for Ralph Ellison, surname first, as a subject. And it tells you that we have 10 subjects in our catalog. So these are all Library of Congress subjects. And this is a preferred Library of Congress phrasing. And if you look over here, though, it tells you that we have 38 items, not necessarily books, but 38 items that are sort of encompassed by these 10 subject headings. Okay? So that's pretty straightforward. Let's go back for a minute, because I want to show you a little bit more about searching. It's going to bump it back a little bit here. Now, let's say you want to narrow it down from the 72 to the 50 that we had, right, when we put our quotation marks around it. I'm going to quickly search that. Right, so our quotation marks gave us 50 instead of 72, weeded out some chaff that we probably don't want to deal with. Now, the way this process works is that you're going to have your essay topics, and you will have narrowed your focus down to something that you're thinking about writing on. Maybe you've got a potential thesis statement on the go, you're thinking of an argument that you want to get at in your essay. So you start narrowing your focus with subject terms. So you've got Ralph Ellison, and we'll use and. And is part of what I'll call Boolean logic for now, and I'll explain in more detail later. Basically, if you want to narrow your search, remember that and in between search terms is going to be a narrowing force here. So if you put and in, it's going to narrow. If you use or, it's going to broaden your search. And if you remember those two things, that and narrows and or broadens, then you've got a pretty good handle on what we call Boolean logic here. So Ralph Ellison, and let's just do something like politics. Okay, so Ralph Ellison and politics, let's see what it comes up with. 11 items. Now, is politics the only word? Well, frankly, the only word for politics? That might sound a little silly, but what if you wanted to search multiple words, say you've got your synonyms worked out, and you're already thinking in terms of, well, there's politics, but they might call it political in a book title or a subject heading. Some trendy theoretician might talk about, politicization or something like that. Some $60 word for the same thing. There is a way to search multiple words without having to search them all individually, and it's called truncation. And what you do is you use your asterisk. So you use that asterisk above your 8, and what that asterisk now does is it tells the catalog, I want to search for every word that begins with politic. So let's just see what that does here. With any luck at all, we'll have a bigger number than 11 if we're doing our job right. So we have 14, and what that means is that it found books with, well, there's politics there. Let's see if we can find something with politics again. Political here. So it is finding other suffixes after the word politic. So it's working, it gave us more hits, and it saved us from having to search. You could do Ralph Ellison and politics and, or politics or political or politicization. But this way, that asterisk is gonna do the finding for you. All right, so that's another great way to increase your search results with a little bit less work involved. Make the catalog do some of the work for you. Okay, so that's kind of a fairly quick and dirty look at how to search the catalog. It can get fairly complicated. You can create endlessly complex search strings up here, where you put parentheses around chunks of search and you use your Boolean ands and ors. There's also a not for your Boolean operators. That's what the and or are. There's a not in there, but I rarely use not. In the 20-something years that I've been a researcher, I've probably used not a handful of times in my searching. So it's not something I emphasize, but if you're ever doing research where you wanted to search Ralph Ellison and politics, but not jazz, say, or Ralph Ellison and the color blue, that would be exciting, but not the color green or something like that, you can use your not and exclude certain subjects from your search. Okay, so that's a quick look at searching. I'm going to pop back to the PowerPoint for a sec and just kind of zip forward. Books to journal articles. We've been searching the catalog, looking at books. We did look at an electronic book. The catalog now will find some journals and even some journal articles. It will find book chapters. So the catalog isn't just for books anymore. It'll find a lot more things. But if you move from kind of the big picture of the book, right, that's a large chunk of research, to, say, the individual journal article, which is more like a chapter in a book, then we go to some other technologies, which are databases. And we use those databases because they index and provide abstracts, if you look down here at the bottom. They index articles, so they basically create a database which makes it easier to find things via title, author, subject, things like that. But they also tend to provide abstracts which work the same way. I explained before, an abstract is like a short executive summary of the article or the book, as we were looking at earlier. And the databases will also, more often than not now, include an abstract for the article. Again, that gives you something short, sweet, and to the point to look at, and lets you have a look to see if that article is going to be useful without reading all 20 to 30 pages of it, perhaps. So if you can find abstracts for articles, which we'll look at in a minute, that's helpful as well. How do you get to the databases? I'll go from this slide with my lovely red arrows. There's a couple of choices here. Let's go back to the website. Go to the home page. Now we're back to the home page. You can look at articles and databases. Back to our center tabs. Now let's say that you're in an English class and you want to go right to the English subject page, and I'll show you what a subject page is in just a second. You can do that from here. Now, I've mentioned the Modern Language Association and the MLA International Bibliography a couple of times in passing. If you know the database, you can type it in here and search for it specifically. Most of us don't memorize the titles of all the databases, so it may not be the most efficient way to do it. What I like to do is shift away from these tabs for articles and databases, go over to the left again where I showed you that How Do I button, right? Showed you the How Do I pages. I'll emphasize that again. But move up a couple of notches to Find Resources. Now, this is my own preferred way to do it. I happen to think it's efficient. I also like a more linear breakdown of what's available to me for searching for resources. So here you've got a nice, vertical list. We've got our catalog that we just looked at, the articles and databases. Again, it goes to the subject pages. It does have an alphabetical breakdown, but who wants to scroll through all of the P's to find a database, or maybe not find it if you have the title wrong or something like that. What I would prefer, and what I think is probably the best way to do it, is to go to the subject pages. Okay, there's other resources here, course resources, that may be of particular interest to you. It's good to see that there as well. Other library catalogs, if you're interlibrary loaning, you can use that as well. Yeah, okay. Let's go right to the subject pages though. Now, what we've done as librarians, because we're big nerds, is we've broken down our special areas. So if I take care of English and drama, for instance, they just happen to be back to back here. I also am the librarian for anthropology and archaeology, but I'm not going to talk about that today. But what we've done is we've created a subject page. So the nice thing about the subject pages, I'll go back, is that no matter what class you're in, because if you're not just taking English classes, everything's here for you. If you're in history, Donna, our history librarian, she's created 2 pages, one more generic modern world and one specific to North America for history. There's a Native Studies page here. There's Northern Studies. The two are pretty closely connected there. But let's go to English, which is my area, neck of the woods here. So what we've done is we've created a page with this principle in mind. We want to have a one-stop shop, if you will. Let's find one central point where you can go to find the best sources you need for your English research. So, and we call it Best Bets here. You can see we've got tabs up top, journal articles and databases, book reviews, performance reviews if you're doing Shakespeare or if you're in a drama class, something like that. There's dictionaries, encyclopedias, websites, links to our special collections, which you're probably not going to use much at all right now. But best bets are what they sound like. What's my best opportunity here, my best option? And what we've decided, and I've decided, is that these 4 databases are kind of the best place to hit first. Okay? And they're all going to search fairly similarly, so let's dive into one, and we'll start with the MLA International Bibliography. Let's jump into that and start having a look. Now, we tended to default to the advanced search screen because the simple search box can get pretty complicated. If you're a veteran searcher in the library catalog and the databases and you know how to create long, complex search strings to get where you need to get, have at it. But for the rest of us, it's nice to have the 3 search boxes here and nicely laid out our Boolean operators. So Boolean logic, just connecting things with and, or, not. And as I said, if you remember that and narrows your focus and or broadens it, you've got a pretty good handle on it. But you've got it here, so instead of even typing and, you can just connect your search this way. Or you can do what I did in the catalog and type in Ralph Ellison and politics or what have you. Over here, choose a database. We're not going to worry about that right now. But where am I going to search the terms I'm searching? Select a field and all text are both pretty much keyword searching. They're similar to the word search function in the catalog. So again, they're a good place to start when you're kicking in terms, trying to see what, initially when you're trying to see what kind of results you're going to get. You're at the beginning of your research process. It's a great place to start. Okay, but you can search by author, you can search by, and some of it's a little hidden down here. You can scroll down and search by title, subjects. You can search by folklore topic if that intrigues you. But let's just keep it on select a field because that'll act basically as a word search for us. And I'll explain these limits as we go. What I want to do is just work the database for a few minutes. So we'll do some searching and we'll see if our limits here, our search limits, it says limit your results. We'll see if those are working for us. And again, for me, it's about efficiency and speed and, sort of positive access to these research materials. How can I find it quickly and how can I find quality materials? So again, let's go back to my buddy Ralph Ellison. If only he knew I was his buddy. Okay, no fancy tricks here. Again, just Ralph Ellison, all by his lonesome, without quotation marks or anything. Took a couple of seconds there, but that's still pretty fast. I'm liking it. 873 results. Yay! No, not really. Do you want to wade through 873 results? I don't, but I'm lazy. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to narrow this down a bit. I want to point out that when I did this search before Christmas, it was 866 results. It's now 873. Yes, obviously they've added some items in the last month or so. But what it says more than that is that these databases are always evolving. They're always growing. Materials are always being added. New materials are being added, like current research, but also digitization projects they're digitizing, via PDF or HTML documents. They're bringing older research materials into the virtual realm here too. So you're finding that the coverage back into history is getting better as they digitize things. But, to go from 866 to 873 in about a month on one search here shows you that these databases are always changing for you. Okay? And that's part of our job, is to make sure that our databases are of that kind of quality, that we're always building research. We're always trying to provide more for you, and the databases are usually pretty awesome at accomplishing that. So our 873, as I said, I don't really want to wade through that. I want to see if I can make a bit of a difference in my search. I mean, sometimes when I do in my own research, I will sit down and wade through a big number, depending on what it is I'm doing, but it's certainly not the most efficient, time-savvy way of searching. So let's do what we did before in the catalog. We'll just get the quotation marks around it, and we'll have a look at what that does for us. Wow, there's my original 866. So in a weird coincidence, it's dropped it down to the same number that the total was a month ago or so. But what it's done here, again, is it's gotten rid of all the Ralph so-and-so and so-and-so Ellisons that don't have anything to do with our guy here. So it's not a big drop. We still have way too much to wade through, but it's a start, and it shows you that the system is working, that we can turn it into an exact phrase and get to where we need to go. Now, in a similar fashion, back to sort of tips and tricks time here, let's find a good example here. Ralph Ellison and improvised history. Use the subjects here to your advantage. The databases do very similar things to the catalog, and the phrasing tends to be fairly similar to Library of Congress phrasing, but here you have the subject terms for this article on Ralph Ellison. So if you're looking for narrative technique, maybe that's what you're interested in, and you're comparing Ralph Ellison to other authors, clicking on this subject heading may get you some other equally helpful hits. The self, cultural identity, relationship to improvisation and jazz music here. They've done the legwork here for you. Use it to your advantage. And obviously clicking on Invisible Man, that novel I mentioned before, that'll take you to articles in this database dealing specifically with this novel. Okay, now your primary subject author, note again that they've gone surname first, and this will take you to anything that they've got by Ralph Ellison. If it's a chapter, maybe one of his short stories was published in a journal that this database has in its holdings. So that's clickable as well. So like I say, you can actually get the database to do some legwork for you, or even just use it to provide alternate terms if you're having a bit of trouble searching. So let's back it up for a second here. The next thing I want to do is have a look now at our limits. Now, let's start with language just for the sake of argument. You can start anywhere you want. I don't speak Afrikaans, as it says here. My Arabic is pretty rusty. I have to admit I'm a bad Canadian. I don't even speak French, so I'm going to just stick with English, which I know best. So I'm going to limit my language to English. Quick search there. We've still got Ralph Ellison in quotation marks. drops it down to 838 from 866. So anything that wasn't strictly in English, it's pulled that out, and now I'm not having to look through and past articles in French, German, or any other language that I don't have capability in. So we've got our English there. We've still got our same search. I think I've already established that I'm as lazy as the next person, so I don't want to be trotting around the library getting journals off the shelf if I don't have to. Or maybe it's 3 in the morning and your paper's due at 9 and it's the 11th hour and you're desperate, so you just want full text. Now there's problems with this, but the advantage is that it'll take you right to articles that the database has full text available for. Now what that means is that if you look at this list, the PDF full text here, that's your access to the full text article. Let's see if there's an HTML we can find. There's linked full text, which will be similar to HTML. This HTML full text and PDF side by side down here. These are the two general formats that you'll find e-resources in, full text in a database. Again, tips and tricks. Aim for the PDF if you can get it. If there's only an HTML, like this one right below, use it by all means. You don't have a choice. But if you can get the PDF, what it is a photo image of the original article. It'll include original pagination, which the HTML sometimes doesn't do. Okay, the HTML will also sometimes pull images out because they create such a load on a database in HTML format. So if you can get the PDF going, grab it. Otherwise, I mean, if you don't have a choice, use the HTML. You may have to go into your style guide and figure out how to cite by paragraph instead of page, but you definitely have some options with full text. You know, more often than not, it's going to be PDF, but HTML is one of the options that you'll have to deal with. You just may have a little bit lacking in the article. The actual article should still be there, but like I say, the pagination may be wonky and images may disappear. Okay, so that was full text. Let's keep that in there and our limit to English. And then we talked about peer-reviewed journals. So say your professor says, look, I want quality academic scholarly work here. I want your bibliography and your essay to represent that. Let's limit it to peer-reviewed journals. So let's search that. And these are the ones that have gone through that rigorous academic quality control, if you will. We're down to 106 results now. What did we start at? 873. This is manageable. And what did this take us? 5 minutes? Less than 10 for sure. And we've managed to narrow our focus down and get our search down to a fairly efficient 106 results. I'm going to back it up for a sec, because the other thing you can do is narrow it down to publication type. Let's say you only wanted books, which would be probably a little bit strange in a journal database, but they do have some books in MLA. But for our sake, let's say we just want to narrow it, because I don't want to be wading through pages of material in my search results. I just want journal articles. So I've got English, I've got my peer-reviewed journals, my full text, and now I've got journal articles. So let's search that. And I'm hoping there won't be a big change. And there isn't a big change, which tells you a lot about the database, because if you've got 106 and then when you narrow it down to journal articles and it stays at 106, it just tells you quite simply that this database is primarily journals. Okay, there are some books and other materials, but for the most part it's journals, so it's actually doing the job that it's meant to do. So we shouldn't be surprised that that number doesn't narrow any further. Okay, so you've got 106 items there. Lots to play with, but a far more efficient result to have to search through. And again, we can narrow. Let's use our and let's think about jazz, because Ralph Ellison was into that. I'm keeping my limits, you can see. So I've decided I'm only interested in Ralph Ellison and jazz, and I'm down to 9 results. So, efficiency-wise and time management-wise, I think we're looking pretty good here. The other thing worth looking at, and you can play with this, you can put or let's try. Let me get rid of that. Ralph Ellison's old friend Albert Murray. Why am I not getting my cursor? There we go. No. Firefox, what have you done to me? Let's just search this. Okay, Ralph Ellison or Albert Murray gives us 108 results. So what that does is it provides articles that talk about both of those authors at the same time. Let me put a parentheses around that. So I'm using the parentheses here just to encapsulate that search parameter, my Ralph Ellison or Albert Murray. And I'm just going to do a quick and search for jazz again and see if that narrows our focus a bit. Yeah, so we're down from 108 to 10 results for both of our authors that we're interested in that kind of search, and jazz. Okay, so the system works. Once we start narrowing our focus as part of our research process and our essay design process, right, as you start getting to thesis statements, starting to really focus in on your central argument, then your search strategies become a little more complicated, but your results become far more narrow and far more easier to work with. Okay, so it's very much tied together in that way. One of the things, I'm going to take my full text off. Now I'm going to try and find something. I think we had a question about Find It, which I'm about to talk about, so I'll get to that in just a sec. But if you see there's PDF full text here, and above, this one doesn't seem to have HTML full text or PDF full text. Sounds like somebody knows what the Find It button does, but for anyone who doesn't, take a couple of seconds and click on that Find It button. It's bright yellow, it's easy to find, and instead of saying, oh man, there's no full text, I'm out of here, click on the Find It. It literally takes seconds, and what it does is it'll tell you definitively whether or not we have it. This one, we don't have it, but there are articles where it says there isn't full text, you click Find It, and it tells you it's in a database, and it'll be listed up top here. Actually, sorry, I'm wrong. This one does say that Oxford University Press Journals has it, so let's follow the process through. So using the Find It button tells you one thing there, that is that our databases don't always communicate perfectly. I wish they would, because sometimes it can drive you nuts, but they don't always communicate perfectly, so we've built in that little sort of, side door access, if you will, and what it does is it's just a little check and balance to give you another option to just make sure whether or not we have it. This one, there you go, you can click on the PDF full text there, and it should come up lickety-split here. And there it is. So Ellison's Reinhardt and Count Basie's Invisible Man and Harvard Blues. A short piece there, it looks like. But we do have full text for something that the MLA International Bibliography claimed we didn't have full text for. So it doesn't take long at all, but it's well worth double checking. I don't want to close all my tabs, which just did. Lovely. I want my home page. Oh, I'm just going to kick the home page back in for a second here. Again, library.usask.ca, and that'll get us there. I'm going to quickly zip back into the databases. So you're going to find there's a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, it's very similar searching, whether it's MLA. We'll go back in here for a sec. This is an EBSCOhost database. They're the ones who built it and provided this platform, if you will, for the MLA bibliography to use. You're going to find in other databases this same screen and the same EBSCOhost symbol there. So you'll be set up just fine for searching there. Other databases tend to use similar platforms. They're not going to look exactly the same, but let's just go to Project Muse for a sec. Project Muse, for example, you've got a simple search box there, and you can also advanced search. There's the one I wanted to show you was, if this will back me up a little bit, something like CBCA Complete, I think is a different, this is a ProQuest database, but as you can see, very similar search functionality. Your limits are laid out differently, but full text limit, peer-reviewed limit. The other thing that I didn't point out with the MLA, but it's there, is you can also limit by date range. So if you have an assignment where, say, your professor says, I want you to find articles only in the last 20 years, you can set that parameter and make sure that you're not wading through, inappropriate 40-year-old material for a 20-year search. So some good opportunities there as well. I'm going to look at the questions here for a sec because I think I'm going to end it there. What is recall? You've got a book out, I assume, and you're getting a recall message, or you may have had an email from the library. I'm assuming this is what we're talking about. If you get a notice saying that a book you have out has been recalled, it means that somebody like me, well, maybe not me, has gone in and put a hold on it and asked for that book. And what it does is it tends to shorten your loan period a bit and puts, the onus on you to get the book back in a fairly timely fashion so that another library patron can use it. You can also recall books, so let's go back, and I'm going to go to the home page again. I'm just going to do a quick search again. I'll just open up the first item I see. Request hold. If you wanted to put a hold on a book, for off-campus, I would imagine that you would put a request in through the off-campus request system, and they would put a hold on it and get that book for you and ship it out if you're a distance education student and you're not located in Saskatoon. So a request hold is probably something that you don't want to do at this point. You would want to put in a request through the forums and get our off-campus staff to request the book for you. And that'll happen automatically. If you request a book that I have out, they're going to automatically put a hold on it and get me to return it in a timely fashion so that you can have access to it. I'm hoping that's what you meant by recall. If not, it's memory and mine is poor. If it says find it and nothing comes up, how can I access the resource? In a case where the find it button doesn't reveal a communication flaw, and it says that absolutely, and there's no access to it from the catalog, if you have time, and it's always a time constraint, we do have interlibrary loans, and I'll go back to the home page again. If we don't have access to it in our collection, it's our job to get it for you. Because we're an academic library and our primary purpose in life is to serve you, frankly, though you might find that hard to believe at times. But that is what we do, and we try to do it very well. So if you look at this, on the left-hand side of the home page, I clicked on Interlibrary Loan, and then it goes to our Interlibrary Loan form here. And if you click on Create a Request, and actually I'm going to back that up for a sec. I'm going to close all tabs. Jesus, this is bugging me. Let's do that again. Is that going to go to my homepage? No. Library. Okay, so on the left-hand side, let me just point out that how do I again, the find resources that I pointed out before, and then down further, tools and services, interlibrary loan, create a request, and that'll take you to the form you need. The user ID is your NCID and your password. And in you guys, for distance education students, I think it's always going to be Murray Library, but don't quote me on that. But for the sake of argument, if you do put in an interlibrary loan request, just put Murray Library in there. And what I'll also do is I'll make a note to have a quick discussion with my off-campus staff and make sure that you can interlibrary loan, or if it's more efficient to get them to interlibrary loan for you. I'll double check, and I'll get Rita to let you know that. So there's your interlibrary loan form there. For the person who did mention the Find It button, I'm glad you did, because it means that you know that it's there as a function. Like I say, take the extra 10 seconds and hit that button to see if it's going to find a glitch in our database communications. If not, interlibrary loans is available to you, and it's actually become a faster and faster service than when I was a student. You know, it used to take 2 weeks to a month to get something through interlibrary loan. Now it's a matter of, a week to 10 days is, a week to 10 days is awesome, like within a week to 10 days. And if it goes beyond that, we're as frustrated usually now as you are. What else do we have? How do I find volume issue, sorry. Volume and issue numbers of journals so I can find specific e-journals. That's a good question. Are you using the catalog? If we're talking the catalog, because in the databases, once you find a journal article via, your subject search, word search, what have you, you've got your volume and issue information there. But if you are using the catalog, I'm just going to think of a journal offhand that. I don't want to. Please, is this right? No. Can I think of a journal when I need one?
Canadian Studies.
Sure. Thanks. Let's see if it comes up. Canadian Studies, lovely. There we go. When you open up the record, so when it came up, and you had a little bit of information here with the location, 4th floor of the Murray Library, a call number, there is volume information there, but once you open it up, then it starts to break it down. Depending on the volume and issue information, though, you may actually have to have a look at the actual journal to do that. In the databases, you can actually search for specific journals, and you can break those down by year. This is about as close as you get. I'm just going to click on that. Yeah, that's about as close as you get for the catalog as far as specific volume and issue information. Some of them don't even have the date, as you can see, so here this helps you narrow it down a bit. Let's pop back to the databases for a sec, and I'll just go to the MLA because that's where we were before. Okay. The MLA directory of periodicals up top here. You can find your, we'll just pick one at random here. Accents on Shakespeare. We'll see if this has the breakdown I want it to have. So you can search within the publication. What I'd really like, though, is a journal that takes me to... I'd have to find this. Alright, I'm not going to search for it because I probably won't find it in a timely fashion. But often what they'll do is it'll take you to the journal's website and it'll have a breakdown by year or sometimes by volume, which you can then open up. Like 1990, you could open up and it'll say, volume whatever 1990, and then issue 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you click on the specific issue number, it'll open up that issue. It works a little bit differently depending on the database, but most of the databases will have a directory of the journals that they have built into the database, and you should be able to search each journal separately using a similar method. So it's not as much a show and tell, I'm afraid, but if I keep hitting the wrong journal, it's not going to be
If you
too
go to
helpful.
Saskatoon, you need volume and issue numbers to find them on the shelf, though.
Yeah, and if you go into the database, any particular article you find will have that information. So let's do that. Oops. Ralph. So if you look here at this first one, I don't know if it's going to be bigger. It might be hard to see depending on the screen you're looking at. The journal is Callaloo, 2011. It's the winter issue, 34, volume 34, number 1, winter, and the pagination. So as long as you have a call number, if it's, see here you won't need it because it's available full text. Actually, no, we'd need to find it for it. But if you, and I won't don't quote me on Callaloo because we may not have it in our collection. But for the most part, if you're in the databases and it's not full text, if you click on the Find It button, okay, we've got it through Project Muse. So again, an example where our databases aren't communicating perfectly. Otherwise, it would tell you that our collection had it up here and it would give you a call number. So as long as you have a call number and the volume issue, throwing winter in there doesn't hurt because sometimes that's what you see even on the spine of a journal on the shelf, and you've got your page numbers, then you can grab it off the shelf and do whatever photocopying you might need. Are we out of time?
I think so. It's 3 minutes to 3.
Okay. Let me pop back out for a sec. So I know that's a lot of information for a fairly short period of time. This is actually longer than my usual classes, which are about 50 minutes. But let me go back for 1 sec, and I'll just show you the subject page again. Because if you need anything from me... Back to Find Resources, subject page, English, and do this if you're in a history class and you need to talk to Donna, our history librarian. We all have our contact information on our subject pages so that you can email me, you can give me a phone call. I'm here Wednesday through Friday usually, so if you get a hold of me on a Monday, you'll probably hear from me the same day because I check my email a lot. But if you phone me, I probably won't get back to you till Wednesday. But there's my contact information there if you have questions, or if we went too fast or something's not quite clear as mud here. So that's where you find that. And other than that, thank you very much. I hope this was helpful.
So those of you who want to look again at what Tony had to say, you can email me and I'll give you the web address and you can watch it on SCN, the eCast network. So, and Tony, if you would like to watch yourself on the eCast network, I'll give you the password.
Oh.
But for those of you who want to refresh yourselves on anything he said, I'll give you the password for the eCast for this one. So thanks again, Tony. And
thank you.
We hope to see you in term 1 next year. Okay.
Yes, bye.
Thank you. Are we off?